In this video, we're going to talk about the S23, the S23 Plus, and the S23 Ultra. These are the brand new devices that Samsung just announced in San Francisco, and we're going to cover everything you need to know. A few things you probably won't see in some of the other videos on the internet, but the biggest thing here is that there's a big change here that we have that is very unique. Samsung and Qualcomm are working together to make a unique processor to power these devices. So, without further ado, my name is TK. Let's go ahead and talk about everything you need to know about the S23 series of devices for 2023. Let's check that out. Like and subscribe and make sure you hit that bell icon so that you're always notified whenever we have new videos on the channel. First and foremost, there's three versions of these devices. There's the S23, the S23 Plus, and of course, there is the Ultra. All of them are going to be running Android 13 and of course running OneUI 5.1. That's the biggest upgrade that we have here. There's going to be some similarities, but the general main thing that you need to know is there's going to be 4 colors, and all 4 colors are going to come into all 3 of these devices. So we have the Phantom Black, the Cream, the Green, and the Lavender. And that's going to be basically the configuration that you're going to be able to pick up. The S23 and the S23 Plus are very similar when it comes down to the specifications. There's primarily 3 big things that are going to be the big differences between the two. The large display, the basically obviously larger battery because of the large display, and at the end of the day is that the charging technology that we're using on the S23 Plus is up to 45 watts, where the S23 is up to 25 watts. So that's one of the big differences. But they're both running the same processor, they both run the same camera sensors on the back as well as on the front, and of course have pretty much the same exact experience. The biggest thing I will probably say if you're looking to pick up either the S23 or the S23 Plus is you have to figure out which form factor do you prefer. Do you prefer the slightly smaller device, or do you want basically the one that's a little bit bigger? At the end of the day, it's going to come down to that pretty much. It's aesthetics at the end of the day, but you're getting exactly the same experience. The S23 and the S23 Plus are featuring basically a triple camera setup in the back, a 50 megapixel primary shooter, 12 megapixel camera for the ultra wide, and a telephoto lens of 10 megapixels. Now, this is the same 10 megapixel camera that's on the S23 Ultra, up to 3 times optical and 30 times space on the 23 and the 23 Plus. 8K video, 4K 60, 12 megapixel front-facing camera with 4K 60, all of those are going to be there. I think that's going to be the main difference. When it comes down to configuration as far as storage and basically the capabilities, what you're able to do, both will have 8 gigs of RAM for storage capability, for the RAM configuration, but the S23 will start at 128, where the S23 Ultra will start at 256. And some places when you're pre-ordering, you are going to be able to get that basically a spec bump in the storage, meaning you will basically be bumped up to the next storage level. And that's going to be a big key when it comes down to the S23 Ultra, because in there, that's also going to change your RAM automatically. Now, both of them are powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 mobile platform for Galaxy. And what essentially that means is it's a collaboration between Qualcomm and Samsung to provide us a processor that basically optimize on both the CPU and the GPU. But when it comes to the CPU on the Prime core, that Prime core is able to go all the way up to 3.36 gigahertz, as opposed to the 3.2 gigahertz that we typically get. So it's roughly about a 0.05% improvement of performance from a standard 8 Gen 2 that you may see. This is the same TSMC technology of 4 nanometer architecture that we've seen with the other 8 Gen 2. Basically, the fingerprint sensor is going to be the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor. We're also going to be looking at the front-facing camera for face unlock, pretty much standard. Gorilla Glass Victus 2 plus armor aluminum that's going to be there to protect our devices. UW, 5G sub-6, and ultra-wideband is going to be supported depending on the carrier that you're picking it up or the version that you're getting. Now, in the S23 Ultra, we're going to be talking about basically that this is obviously the big boy. This is the Note of the devices that carries an S Pen built in, and this is carrying it over to the S23 series, well, when it comes to the S23 Ultra. The S23 and the S23 Plus do not have an S Pen, but they both also share 120 frames per second refresh rate flat display on both of those devices. Again, difference is either 6.1 or 6.6 inch, depending on the size that you'd like to go. When it comes down to the Ultra device, we're looking at a 6.8 inch display, and that's going to be at a QHD+, 120 frames per second adaptive refresh rate, of course, to give us that experience. And it's a curved display. It's a sharper curve that we've seen than what we saw last year with the S22 Ultra, and that's actually also given us the ability of seeing why the sides of the device is a little bit more squared off. They're not exactly squared off, but it's a little bit more flat, easier to hold in the hand. So that's one of the biggest differences that we get in there. Now, when it comes down to the overall camera setup on the back, we also have that brand new Samsung camera, the 200 megapixel camera. Now, the big benefit here is that you're going to be able to choose between a 200 megapixel camera, well, an image, a 50 megapixel binned image, or a 12 megapixel binned image. Depending on the configuration, what you're looking for, you'll be able to pick one of those resolutions and of course still get that capability of the higher megapixel sensor. What you're looking at right now are some images that were taken of me at a basically a pre-unpacked event that I was able to get my hands on with the devices, and they were able to share with me this experience. An absolute fantastic experience. The other two camera sensors on the back are the 12 megapixel camera sensor. It's going to be the ultra wide. And when it comes down to the telephoto, I mentioned to you guys that the 10x, the primary 10 megapixel camera, it's going to give us that 3x optical zoom, is still here. And then we have a secondary one that gives us a 10-time optical zoom. Now with that, the S23 and the Plus give us the ability of going up to 30 times space zoom, but the S23 Ultra still goes up to 100 times. And one of the biggest things that you want to be appreciative here is, as you're seeing there in that video, is that although in the preview image my hand was pretty shaky and I wasn't able to basically focus very heavily on the image I was taking, once it captures the image and processes it, it is such a better, a more legible and much more clear image that it's almost surprising that it was able to pull that out of the image or out of that picture that I was trying to shoot. And this is again going in a massive room from one side to the other, and when I actually wasn't looking through the phone, couldn't even find where the writing were. That's how hard it was to be able to see where that is. So definitely very nice and definitely very focused there. The other thing we also have obviously is on the front facing camera, all three of these devices are going to carry the exact same camera sensor, and that's the 12 megapixel camera sensor, capable of shooting 4K 60 frames per second. As you're looking in there, I took 3 portrait images. All 3 are on obviously the front facing camera on these devices. And you can definitely see that you can appreciate that the selfie experience, although it is basically, you would think the Ultra would have the better experience, it's actually mirrored all across. So you're definitely getting some of those benefits in there. Now, as far as storage and configuration, this is where it becomes a little bit more informative, and I feel like you guys need to be aware of this. On the S23 Ultra, the base model is an 8256. That's how it starts off. So the 8256 is going to be the base model that you're able to pick up. But because they're doing this with the pre-order, that they're going to bump you up to the next storage capacity, when you go up to the 512 gig storage on the device, you're automatically bumped up to the 12 gigs of storage of RAM. So that it not only does it give you better configuration for storage, but you're also getting RAM upgrade automatically. So definitely very nice, and that's something to keep in mind, especially one of the main, I would feel like the main features of pre-ordering this, while this is still an available option for us at the storage there. But again, 4K 60 frames per second, 8K 30 frames per second, basically some of the great capabilities that we'll be able to get out of these devices. Unfortunately, because this was a quick hands-on, I did not have a chance to be able to take this device out to test in the outdoors and take a lot of images. The images I'm sharing with you guys through this that I was able to get from the device that we were looking at are of me basically posing in front of a basically a studio environment with different backgrounds that they were able to share with me there. And I was able to get into this massive room where they put all of those pictures on frames, and it just looked absolutely like one of the best things you can ever do for like your own studio if you ever really wanted to look at a lot of your pictures there. It was definitely very nice. And here we have a 5000 milliampere battery on the Ultra, as opposed to the 4700 on the Plus, and of course the 3900 on the standard S23. And here we're charging at 45 watts, similar to the Plus. That's one of the other benefits of having the larger battery, and we also have faster technology. Wireless charging, reverse wireless charging, all of those things are pretty much the same. Connectivity, for the most part, it's the same thing across all of these devices. Because again, it's going to depend on the version that you're picking up. If it's locked to a carrier, you're going to get the bands that they support there. And of course, last but not least, is the fact that we have an S Pen, so a lot of optimization is there. One thing I will say that I found out about this essentially is that if you cannot use an S Pen from an S22 Ultra on the S23 Ultra. It won't fit in the actual casing, and it also won't charge from the device. You can use it, it will work on the display, just a little bit of a difference, so just be aware. If you have extra S Pens when you get the S23 Ultra, just don't try to use them other than use them on the display. And you do need to eject the S Pen for the device to recognize that it needs to look for the S Pen and allow you to use that on the display. Samsung's actually focusing very heavily on trying to make these devices actually use a lot more recycled material, and that's one of the biggest things in there, from the basically the volume rocker to the power button, even to some of the components built inside of the S23 Ultra or even the S23 and the Plus, and of course coming back down to the box. Depending on the promotion you're able to get, you should be able to pick up a good charger there. A 45-watt charger would definitely be the best solution for you to get the best experience on the S23 or even the S23 Plus or the Ultra. Now, the last thing I do want to share is that they did provide me information saying that overall the DeX experience did get some minor improvements over previous generation with OneUI 5.1. So very much same experience as far as wired and wireless solution, but definitely some optimizations done with Android 13 and of course OneUI 5.1. Now, let's talk about, should you upgrade from the S22 Ultra or the S22 series to the S23? Because technically this is a year upgrade and it may not make sense to some people. I will say that there is a case that could be made for a reason why you'd want to do this. It's featuring the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, a great processor, but a processor that had some concerns when it came to heat and performance in a sense of how it was managed by different companies. And I'm not specifically speaking on this one company. We had concerns across the board. The 8 Gen 2 or the 8 Plus Gen 1 did work on that. The TSMC implementation here not only provided us better binning, but also provided us better thermal management. And of course, we see the benefit here with the 8 Gen 2. So if you are a heavy gamer and your concern was always about the fact that the device was warming up a lot and you're not able to enjoy it for a long amount of time, I think the S23 series will fix a lot of that problem for you. If you like to create content, edit, and produce content off your phone, you like to use DeX to its full power, I feel like the S23 Ultra and the S23 series will definitely do a little bit better for you there, and that may be a good reason. Otherwise, if your general usage is basically just enjoying devices, online, content consumption and taking pictures and so on, I don't really feel like this is going to be a big driver for you. I think this is probably going to start going back to maybe a few years earlier where you're able to pick up devices. Let's say if you're coming in from an S10, an S20, this is definitely going to be a good upgrade for you guys from there. The camera improvements, the optimizations that we see, Android 13, all of those things are definitely going to bring in and provide you the best experience you can get from Samsung. As far as the pricing and availability, for the most part, you're going to be able to find this obviously on almost every carrier, unlocked directly from Samsung. Pricing is pretty much the same that we saw last year. Starting price is $799 for the S23, $999 for the S23 Plus, and $1,200 for the S23 Ultra. Again, if you get it during those special promotions, you should be able to pick up a storage upgrade. That will get you an additional 4 gigs of RAM on the S23 Ultra because of the spec bump that they had. It starts at 8,256, but if you get the 512 gigs of storage, it automatically bumps you to the 512. There is no 8,512, so that kind of gets you that configuration that you want to get there. With that being said, what I would probably say is there's a lot to be covered on this device. I don't have one yet, so obviously I'm not doing a full review. At least we know now that Samsung and Qualcomm are working together to make a unique experience for Galaxy devices, and we're definitely going to want to see how does this actually translate into real life usage. The last thing I will leave you with before we get out of here is essentially how is Samsung going to be managing the performance on this device. In previous generations, Samsung provided us a kind of like a controller to be able to run it at 3 different modes. You had optimized, you had high, and then you had max, or maximum, and that gave us the ability of running battery, like a battery saving experience, which is optimized, high, which is essentially kind of like a medium experience, and of course maximum, which gives us the ability of running this device on the prime core, run the full power of it. And that was something that we saw last year with the S22 Ultras. Now, later in the year, once we started getting the Z Fold 4, we saw that Samsung changed that experience with OneUI 5.0. Essentially, that now we have pretty much is a standard and a light. The light is pretty much what the standard or the optimized was from last year. The difference here is that the max and high are no longer 2 options, they're combined, and then it's managed by the system. So if you're using something that requires a lot more horsepower, like let's say video rendering, gaming, the device will give you the power that you need. But if you're conversely looking at Twitter, Instagram, and you're just doing general things around the device, it's not going to overclock the device to give you the full power, the 3.36 basically gigahertz on the prime core. It's obviously going to tailor the experience. The same way with the refresh rate on all of these devices. It's adaptive and it's providing you the best, longest battery experience on the device, again, with all the powers and optimizations that Samsung has to offer us. So there's a lot of things that I covered for you guys. There'll be some links in the description below if you'd like to not only pre-register or order your devices and be able to basically get that promotion. Again, the biggest thing I will probably say is if you're thinking of getting the S23 Ultra, make sure you pre-order it because you are going to be able to get not only the additional storage, you'll get the additional RAM with it, and it's definitely going to be very beneficial there. Pricing didn't go up. There's still some promotions in there and hopefully some good trade-ins. I don't have access to that deals yet. I hope you enjoyed this video, and my hope at the end of the day is that you found some of the stuff that I shared with you guys today here that is unique to this video and was not shared in any of the other videos that are on the internet. Thank you very much for the support. I'll see you in the next one.